everyone, and welcome to another episode of Biblio Files. This is the program on AADL TV, where each episode we choose one book topic to discuss. My name is Lucy, and as usual, I'm here with Christopher and Amanda. And the book topic that we are going to talk about today is a great book series. So, Amanda, what great book series do you have to tell us about?
All right, so this is a pretty fun topic. I actually haven't read a ton of great series or series in general, other than things like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or Hunger Games, things like that. So I wanted to bring back a book I actually mentioned on the first episode of Biblio Files back in the day. What was it, fall of 2021 or 2020? 2020. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and the book series and the first book in this series is Jar City. So when I first mentioned this book on that episode was a books not a lot of people have heard of or talk about. And this Jar City is actually the first book in a very long series. So the book is written by Arnaldur Indriðason, and he's an Icelandic author. And this series follows a detective, Detective Erlander, and there are actually 11 books that were published in Icelandic and 9 in English. So I've actually read all 9 books. There's very few books or series where I just like scarf them down and need the next one. And this was one of the more recent ones I did. And I've read all 9 of them. They're all fantastic. So it focuses on this Detective Erlander, and he is brilliant, he's brooding, he's like solitary, he's antisocial, and he's very, very private. He has had a failed marriage. He has a couple of adult children with their own set of struggles that he ends up getting wrapped into. But he also is struggling with the childhood loss of his younger brother who died in a snowstorm. And he was just lost. And so Erlander has spent his entire life with that on his mind and in his heart. He's very troubled by it. He has a couple of work partners that he works with in the forest. He works with Elenborg and Sigurður Oli. And towards the end of the series, a couple of the books actually focus on those two as the main character versus Detective Erlander. So it's kind of neat to meet the other characters a little more in depth to see what their personal life is like. Another major character in the entire series is the country of Iceland. Just the setting that it's in, the beautiful stark landscapes, um, and the books and the stories, they take you to different parts of the country, and you get to learn a little bit very subtly about some of the people, the culture, how they handle things, and the history of Iceland and some of the folklore. Just little bits and pieces, but the main focus is the detectives and then the crime that they're trying to solve. So you've got the books weaving like Erlander's personal life, his troubled past, but you always have a new mystery or murder that needs, or death or dead body that they find that needs solved, and then he and his colleagues work together to solve the crime. So it's really well done. If you're into mysteries, you've probably heard of this author. If you haven't read this one, I recommend it. It's great for fans of like crime fiction or like Nordic mysteries, police procedurals. Absolutely, it's such a good series, and I just really love this series. Really, really, I just love it so much. There's actually a prequel that the author wrote called Reykjavik Nights that happens before this, and it is our main detective, but as a very young detective, just starting out, and that was a pretty fun read too. So that is the Detective Erlander series, 9 books in English, written by Icelandic author Arnaldur Indriðason. Christopher, what did you bring to share for a series?
Well, first of all, I thought it's interesting as I got looking at all kinds of series, why this lends itself so easily to murder mysteries. And it kind of does. I think it's because it's so episodic. Whereas if you take a piece of just regular fiction, it's like one big story that's probably not going to continue on with more and more later on. I also read a mystery. This is the first book out of 18, and I read this for many reasons. We had a guest on the show, Pat, who highly recommended reading this book. The author is also coming to Ann Arbor, so I thought I would give Still Life by Louise Penny a try. This, as I said, it's the first of, I think, 18 Inspector Gamache stories. And before I read the book, I thought his last name was Ganache, but it's spelled with an M, in fact. And this book takes place in Three Pines in southern Quebec. An older woman who is retired and has just begun painting is found dead in the woods. And the inspector is brought in with his team to find out what really happened. So, this is a very interesting setting. It's a very small town. There are a lot of great baked goods and a lot of foods that are described. And there are many red herrings, and there's a wonderful puzzle at the end. One of the inspectors is actually sent home for being very unhelpful. So there's a lot going on in the book. I was told by other people that Louise Penny's later books are even better. And so I look forward to reading some of those. I have to say, the first book, I think my expectations were so high. The first book was a little slow for me in some ways. By page 100, we were just figuring out the murder weapon and what had happened. So it was I wasn't quite expecting that, but I did really enjoy it, and I do look forward to reading some of her other books. So that is Still Life by Louise Penny. Lucy, did you also pick a mystery?
Well, it's a thriller. I'm going to call it a cli-fi thriller series, and it's a relatively new series. There are 2 books out so far. The third one's coming out in November, and the author's at work on a fourth. It's the Alex Carter series. Alex Carter's the protagonist. The first book is called A Solitude of Wolverines. The second book is called A Blizzard of Polar Bears, and then A Ghost of Caribou is coming out in November. And these are books about Alex Carter, who is a wildlife biologist. And in the first book, she's in Montana tracking wolverines. In the second book, she's in Manitoba studying polar bears. But while she's in these locales, there is something that happens that's kind of like a thriller. Either that someone, there's a lot going on, like I think with wildlife conservation and land trusts and people who have interests at stake if wildlife is being conserved. So these all make really good elements for a thriller. What I love about these books, well, there's many things I love about these books. I think that Alex Carter herself is a great protagonist. She's a strong female protagonist. She is independent, and she is so smart about not only what she's studying, but she uses her location really well, which plays really nicely into the thriller. So a lot of the action scenes rely so much on the scenery around her. It's kind of amazing. Like, it's a little bit MacGyver almost, like she understands the climate and the environment where she is. And so she can use that to either get away from people or to ensnare people. It's really, it's kind of brilliantly done. And then the settings, the 2 different settings of the books I read, you're in the Rockies in Montana and then the Arctic in Canada. Like the writing is so evocative and descriptive that you really feel yourself there and you feel yourself pulled in to the mystery. Then on top of that, I learned so much in these books about wildlife and wildlife conservation, like tracking animals, tracking wolverines, polar bear study, how these animals are endangered, how samples are collected. Like, it's all these amazing facts. It was so, first, if you like that kind of thing, which I love, these are great books. And Alice herself, the author, Alice Henderson, is a wildlife conservationist as well as being an author. And so she has done things like surveyed for the presence of grizzly bears, wolves, wolverines, jaguars, endangered bats. And she spends a lot of time in the wild studying it. So authenticity was like super important to her. If it wasn't something she had done herself, she was going to research it meticulously. And so that you can be sure when you're reading about like how they use polar bear hair to tell a polar bear's diet, or the kind of cameras they use to track wolverines, like what you're getting is very precise. So not only are you getting this really thrilling, immersive story, you're learning a lot about these really fascinating animals. that maybe you didn't know that much about before. And then I think because it's this kind of cli-fi, it really gets you invested in what's really going on with wildlife. And there's a lot of great resources listed in the back, and like different places you can explore if you're interested in learning more about the environment or the animals. And so then her third book coming out in November is called A Ghost of Caribou. That will also be Alex Carter, who's this like, she knows martial arts. She's just, I don't know, she's very like, she's a great protagonist. I loved her. She will be in Washington State studying mountain caribou, which are different than like land caribou. And then Alice right now is at work on the fourth book. So, and I think there'll be more. So it's a great series, and I have enjoyed what I've read so far. I've also had the pleasure of speaking with Alice Henderson about these books, and that makes them, I think, I'm even more like feel connected to them in that way. But I highly recommend Solitude of Wolverines is the first one, and then A Blizzard of Polar Bears. That's the Alex Carter series by Alice Henderson. So also a thriller, not really, well, kind of a mystery, but more thrilling. So yeah, so does anyone else have anything to add about great series?
I think part of a great series is having a great like lead character or group of characters that you're following through different adventures and stories or mysteries. Because while you were talking, I also remembered some of the other series I read, and they're all detective series, like from out of Sweden or other stories in Iceland, but they still follow detectives. So I think that's really cool. And you both talked about such wonderful ones.
Well,
yeah, and you too. And I think, yeah, it gives it a good connective thread. Like if you like the character, the main protagonist, you're going to want to go back and find out what they're doing. So
I thought about a nonfiction series like 33 and a Third. I thought would be a lot of fun to look at that series, but I got sucked into to a detective story instead.
yeah. All right. Well, we, as always, want to know what you are reading and if there are great series that you love or that you are looking forward to reading. So please let us know in the, you can click the link below to comment, and we will see you on the next episode of Biblio Files. Thanks.